Mark 16, the ending of Mark 16 is a great passage for any student of the Bible because it raises so many really important questions that are key to the principles of studying the Bible academically. The first thing a student will notice when they open up Mark 16 is they will see that there are different endings, right? The earliest ending is in verse 8, chapter 16, verse 8. And then there are subsequent endings. If you read a study Bible, which I always assign to my students, they will see that there are little subheadings for those short endings. And students will inevitably ask, what's going on here? How can a gospel have multiple endings? Well, that's a very good question. Mm-hmm. So an academic will take a look at that and say, this is about the history of the texts. And so the first question is, what are the manuscripts showing us? And if you look at families of manuscripts, which is how we talk about them, you will see that different families of manuscripts pass down through the ages and at different points. So what that tells us is that there is an earlier ending, and then there are later endings, what we call later redactions of the text. So that raises another set of questions. It raises the question of, well, what was the original ending of the gospel about? What was Mark intending? The best that we can reconstruct with the ending of the gospel at chapter 16, verse 8. It's a very mysterious ending. It ends with the witnesses to the empty tomb running away in fear and silence. It's not a very uplifting ending. And then you go to the subsequent endings, and they have more detail. They're a lot happier. There's a lot more resolution. And so as you think about that over time, what seems to be the case is that the Christian community was adding more details to the end of the gospel because it was more satisfying to them. And what that raises then is the possibility that these are communities reading in very different contexts. Why is Mark's ending satisfying? Why does it work in his context, but doesn't work so well in later contexts? What does that tell us about the needs of the community of readers who were passing these texts along? It also raises really important questions about the relationship of Mark to other Gospels. So if you look at the details in the later endings of Mark's Gospel, they reflect what we find in the ending of the other Gospels, particularly Matthew and Luke. And so it looks like later communities reading Mark were probably influenced by what they read in Matthew and in Luke, and that influenced the endings. So what it tells us is that the gospel tradition was incredibly fluid, much more fluid than we first believe, and that these communities were kind of working out their understanding of what the Jesus story was about and what it meant. The ending of a story is very important, and the fact that they could continue to reflect upon how that story should end tells us a lot about a sense of continuing development and evolution of a religious tradition.